Why does Hollywood spend millions on crime thrillers that still feel safer than one quiet Korean interrogation scene? These films do not just chase killers. They drag you into corrupt police rooms, missing bodies, broken families, and criminals who feel terrifyingly real. In this countdown, you will see 20 South Korean crime thrillers that turned murder investigations into art. And the top pick may expose why Hollywood keeps borrowing their darkness. Number 20. Children, 2011. A child vanishes, a nation watches, and years later, the truth still feels buried under silence. Children is not a loud crime thriller. It is the kind that slowly presses on the chest, because it is built around one of the most painful fears imaginable. Children disappearing, adults failing to find answers in time. The film follows an investigation inspired by the infamous Frog Boys case, using police work, media attention, family grief, and public obsession to create a haunting mystery. What makes it powerful is the way it treats crime as a wound that refuses to close. Every new theory feels like hope, but also like another betrayal waiting to happen. The detectives are not chasing a stylish villain. They are chasing time, memory, and buried evidence. That gives the film a cold, investigative weight. It fits this list because South Korean crime cinema often understands what Hollywood softens. The real horror is not always the killer. Sometimes it is the long wait for truth. Number 19. Diary of June, 2005. Some crime scenes feel disturbing because of what is found, but Diary of June is unsettling because of what the clues seem to predict. The film begins with what looks like a tragic student death, then slowly opens into something darker, stranger, and more morally complicated. At the center is an investigation that refuses to stay simple. The detectives are not just chasing a killer, they are trying to understand a pattern that feels almost impossible, as if the victims are being written into danger before it happens. That concept gives the film a hook that separates it from a standard murder mystery. Beneath the suspense, there is also a sharp look at school pressure, bullying, silence, and the kind of cruelty adults often notice too late. The crime element is not just a plot device. It becomes a way to expose a broken environment. Diary of June works because it turns investigation into accusation. The deeper the case goes, the more uncomfortable the truth becomes. Number 18. Midnight FM, 2010. A live broadcast should feel controlled, but Midnight FM turns a radio studio into a psychological crime trap. The setup is instantly tense. A famous radio host is pulled into a terrifying game when a criminal forces her to follow his instructions, while the clock is running and lives are at stake. What makes this film so effective is how it uses sound, silence, and timing. The danger is not just outside the room. It travels through the microphone, through phone calls, through every word she says on air. The villain's obsession gives the story a sharp, predatory edge, while the public nature of the broadcast makes the situation feel even more suffocating. Korean thrillers often excel at placing ordinary professional spaces under unbearable pressure, and this one turns media performance into survival. It is not just about stopping a criminal. It is about watching someone trapped between public composure and private panic. Midnight FM proves that sometimes the scariest crime thriller is not the loudest one. It is the one whispering directly into your ear. Number 17. Blind, 2011. The witness cannot see the crime, and that single twist makes Blind far more gripping than a routine investigation. The story follows a visually impaired woman who becomes connected to a dangerous case after sensing details others overlook. Instead of treating her blindness as weakness, the film builds suspense around perception itself. What did she hear? What did she feel? What can she prove when the world keeps doubting her? That is where the thriller gains its emotional power. The crime plot carries the tension of a predator moving through the city, but the deeper drama comes from watching a witness fight to be believed. Korean cinema often understands that suspense becomes stronger when the victim or witness is not passive, and Blind gives its lead character courage, intelligence, and vulnerability without turning her into a cliché. The investigation becomes a battle between evidence and instinct, danger and disbelief. It is a crime thriller about seeing clearly in a world that refuses to look closely enough. Number 16. I Saw the Devil, 2010. Some killers are caught to end the nightmare. Here, catching him only begins it. I Saw the Devil is a savage serial killer crime thriller that turns revenge into a disturbing psychological experiment. The story follows a secret agent whose fiancée is murdered by a sadistic killer. But instead of handing him to the police, he chooses a darker punishment: hunting him, hurting him, releasing him, and repeating the cycle. That structure makes the film feel like a crime investigation collapsing into obsession. The killer is not romanticized as a genius. He is brutal, empty, and frighteningly human. The hero is not clean either. His grief keeps pushing him closer to the same darkness he wants to destroy. That is why the film belongs here. It is not just violent for shock. It studies what crime does to the people left behind. Hollywood often turns revenge into satisfaction. I Saw the Devil turns it into contamination, asking whether justice still means anything when the hunter starts looking like the monster. Number 15. The Client, 2011. A courtroom can be just as dangerous as a back alley when everyone is hiding something. The Client begins with a chilling mystery. A woman is missing, a husband is accused, but there is no body, no clean confession, and no easy truth. That uncertainty turns the film into a legal crime thriller, where every argument feels like a weapon. The prosecutor wants conviction. The defense wants doubt. The audience is trapped between both sides, constantly forced to question whether charm, grief, and silence are signs of innocence or guilt. What gives the film its grip is the way it treats the justice system as a battlefield of performance. Evidence matters, but so does manipulation. Truth matters, but so does who tells the better story. Korean crime cinema often thrives when institutions are shown as flawed, pressured, and deeply human, and The Client uses that tension well. It is not a film about one obvious monster. It is about suspicion itself, and how terrifying it becomes when the law cannot fully see into a marriage. Number 14. The Terror Live, 2013. A phone call turns into a national crisis, and suddenly the newsroom becomes the crime scene. The Terror Live is built around one of the sharpest thriller premises in modern Korean cinema. A disgraced news anchor receives a call from someone claiming responsibility for an explosion, and instead of simply reporting the story, he becomes part of it. The film works because it traps ambition, fear, media pressure, and public violence inside one tightening space. Every broadcast decision carries a cost. Every attempt to control the narrative risks making things worse. What looks at first like a terrorism thriller also functions as a crime story about accountability, exploitation, and the ugly machinery behind televised tragedy. The anchor is not a clean hero, and that makes the tension more interesting. He wants redemption, ratings, survival, and control, sometimes all at once. The Terror Live feels painfully modern because it understands how disaster can become content before anyone has even counted the victims. That is what makes it hit harder than a standard hostage thriller. Number 13. 7 Days, 2007. The kidnapping is only the beginning. The real nightmare is the deal attached to it. 7 Days follows a successful lawyer whose daughter is taken, forcing her into an impossible mission. She must get a convicted murderer released if she wants her child back. That premise gives the film immediate urgency, but its real strength is how it twists legal drama into crime thriller panic. The mother is not just fighting a kidnapper. She is fighting time, evidence, public judgment, and the possibility that saving one life may require freeing someone guilty of taking another. The emotional stakes are sharp because every decision feels contaminated. There is no clean path, no comforting moral answer, only pressure closing in from every side. Korean thrillers often shine when they place ordinary parental love inside brutal systems, and 7 Days turns that fear into a relentless chase through courts, police work, secrets, and manipulation. It is the kind of film that asks what justice is worth when someone you love is being used as the bargaining chip. Number 12. Montage, 2013. A cold case does not stay buried when the same nightmare returns wearing a new face. Montage is a kidnapping thriller built on grief, memory, and the cruelty of time. The story connects an old child abduction case with a new crime that appears to repeat the past, forcing investigators and a grieving mother back into wounds that never truly healed. What makes the film powerful is the way it treats crime as something that continues long after the headlines fade. The police may close files, society may move on, but for the families, the case keeps breathing in the room. The mystery unfolds with the patience of a procedural, but the emotional weight makes it more than a puzzle. Every clue carries regret. Every delay feels unforgivable. The film's tension comes from the possibility that justice may arrive too late, or in a form no one is ready to accept. Montage belongs on this list because it understands that the most haunting crime thrillers are not only about catching the criminal, they are about what the crime leaves behind. Number 11. Confession of Murder, 2012. What happens when a killer becomes a celebrity before justice can touch him? Confession of Murder takes a bold, almost outrageous premise and turns it into a slick crime thriller about fame, revenge, and public obsession. Years after a series of murders, a man publishes a best-selling confession and presents himself like a media star, protected by legal limits and surrounded by cameras. That idea alone is disturbing because it understands something ugly about society. People can turn even violence into spectacle if the packaging is attractive enough. The detective who failed to catch the killer is pulled back into the case, carrying humiliation, anger, and unfinished guilt. The film mixes action, investigation, satire, and revenge, but its crime thriller core stays sharp because the question is never just whether the man is guilty. The question is why the public wants to watch him so badly. Confession of Murder feels like a warning dressed as entertainment. It exposes how easily justice can be drowned out by attention, applause, and a perfectly staged confession. Cold Eyes, 2013. In this thriller, the chase begins before the criminal even knows he is being hunted. Cold Eyes is a sleek surveillance crime film about a police unit that tracks professional criminals through cameras, memory, movement, and pattern recognition. Instead of relying only on gunfights or interrogations, the film builds excitement from observation. A glance matters. A route matters. A mistake in timing can expose an entire operation. That gives the story a sharp procedural intelligence, making the audience feel like part of the surveillance team. The criminals are organized and efficient, but the investigators are trained to read the city like a living map. What makes Cold Eyes so watchable is its balance of style and discipline. It has action, but it does not forget the thrill of strategy. It has danger, but it also respects the patience behind police work. Korean crime cinema often finds suspense in systems under pressure. And here, the system is a team of watchers, trying to stop criminals who survive by disappearing in plain sight. Number 9. A Hard Day, 2014. One bad decision should be enough to destroy a man, but A Hard Day keeps asking, what if the cover-up is only the first trap? The film opens with a detective already under pressure, racing through personal grief, professional corruption, and internal investigation, before one shocking accident pushes him into full panic mode. Instead of doing the right thing, he hides the evidence, and that single choice turns his life into a tightening noose. What makes the movie so gripping is how quickly it transforms guilt into suspense. Every room becomes a threat. Every phone call feels like exposure. Every attempt to fix the problem creates a bigger one. This is not a clean hero story. It is a crime thriller about a compromised man trapped inside his own lies. The film works because it understands that corruption is not always grand or dramatic. Sometimes it begins with fear, shame, and one desperate shortcut. Then comes the real hook. Someone else knows what happened, and that person is even more dangerous. From there, A Hard Day becomes a savage game of pressure, blackmail, and survival. It is tense, darkly funny, brutally paced, and constantly inventive. Hollywood often makes corrupt cop thrillers feel glossy. This one makes corruption feel sweaty, claustrophobic, and horribly alive. Number 8. The Man from Nowhere, 2010. The quietest man in the room is sometimes the one everyone should have feared first. The Man from Nowhere begins with silence, loneliness, and a pawnshop owner who seems disconnected from the world, until a young girl next door becomes the one fragile human bond he cannot ignore. When she is dragged into a violent criminal network, the film shifts from intimate sadness into a full crime thriller storm. What makes it unforgettable is not just the action, but the emotional reason behind it. The hero is not chasing glory. He is not trying to prove anything. He is moving through the underworld because a child has vanished, and every criminal between him and the truth becomes part of the same nightmare. The film uses trafficking, kidnapping, organized crime, and hidden identities to build a world that feels merciless without becoming empty spectacle. Every fight carries grief behind it. Every discovery makes the mission feel more urgent. Won Bin's performance is controlled and haunted, giving the character a wounded stillness that makes the violence hit harder when it finally erupts. This is why the movie became one of Korea's most iconic modern thrillers. It has the structure of a rescue mission, the soul of a tragedy, and the intensity of a crime story that refuses to look away from innocence being swallowed by darkness. Number 7. A Bittersweet Life, 2005. Loyalty sounds noble until the underworld decides it is cheaper to bury than reward it. A Bittersweet Life follows a high-ranking gangster who has spent years serving his boss with discipline, elegance, and absolute control. Then one assignment changes everything. He is asked to watch the boss's young girlfriend, suspecting betrayal, but when he makes a decision based on his own buried humanity, the criminal world turns on him with vicious speed. The brilliance of this film is how it turns gangster codes into a death sentence. Nobody is innocent, but almost everyone believes they are following rules. The problem is that those rules are built on ego, possession, and violence, disguised as honor. Lee Byung-hun gives the film a magnetic center, playing a man who barely speaks his emotions but carries them like a loaded weapon. The story is crime thriller, revenge tragedy, and noir fever dream at once. Its style is polished, but the emotions underneath are raw: humiliation, betrayal, pride, and the unbearable shock of realizing devotion means nothing when power feels insulted. Hollywood gangster films often worship the empire. A Bittersweet Life studies the moment the empire eats one of its own. By the end, the title feels almost cruel, because the sweetness was never safety. It was only the last beautiful thing before the fall. Number 6. Sympathy for Lady Vengeance, 2005. Some revenge stories roar. This one walks in quietly, beautifully, and makes the silence feel dangerous. Sympathy for Lady Vengeance centers on a woman released from prison after serving time for a terrible crime, but the truth behind her conviction is far more twisted than the public image suggests. She emerges calm, elegant, and almost saintly on the surface. Yet every gesture is part of a long plan shaped by pain, guilt, and punishment. What makes the film powerful as a crime thriller is its obsession with justice after the official system has already failed. The crime is not treated as a simple backstory. It becomes a moral wound spreading through victims, families, and everyone forced to confront what punishment should actually mean. Park Chan-wook gives the film a strange beauty, using color, music, and controlled imagery to make revenge feel almost ceremonial. But underneath that beauty is something cold and devastating. The film refuses to make vengeance easy. It asks whether revenge can bring peace, whether guilt can be cleaned away, and whether ordinary people can face evil without becoming damaged themselves. Lee Young-ae's performance is unforgettable because she never turns the character into a simple avenger. She is grieving, calculating, wounded, and terrifyingly focused. This is crime cinema as moral reckoning, where the final punishment is not just physical, it is spiritual. Number 5. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, 2002. This is what happens when desperation makes one wrong choice, and the world answers with no mercy. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance begins with poverty, illness, unemployment, and a man trying to save his sister. His plan leads to kidnapping, but the film refuses to treat crime like a clever game. Here, crime is messy, tragic, human, and catastrophic. Nobody fully understands the damage until it is already irreversible. That is what makes the film so devastating. It does not offer a clean villain to hate from a safe distance. Instead, it places damaged people inside impossible circumstances and watches grief mutate into vengeance. The thriller element comes from the chain reaction. One crime creates one loss creates one revenge, and revenge creates another wound that cannot be closed. Park Chan-wook's direction is colder and more grounded here than in his later stylized work, which makes the brutality feel even more disturbing. The silence, the industrial landscapes, the emotional numbness, everything feels drained of comfort. This is not a revenge fantasy. It is an autopsy of revenge itself. Hollywood often builds thrillers around justice arriving at the end. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance suggests something far darker. Sometimes justice and revenge become indistinguishable, and by the time anyone notices, every life in the story has already been poisoned. Number 4. The Yellow Sea, 2010. A man crosses a border for money, but what waits for him is not opportunity. It is a slaughterhouse of betrayal. The Yellow Sea follows a desperate taxi driver from the Korean-Chinese border region who accepts a murder contract after debt, abandonment, and hopelessness leave him with almost nothing. At first, the job seems like a brutal solution to a ruined life. Then the plan collapses, and the film becomes a relentless crime nightmare of killers, brokers, gangsters, police, and survival instincts colliding at full speed. What makes the Yellow Sea extraordinary is its sense of exhaustion. The violence is not glamorous. The chase is not heroic. Everyone looks tired, hungry, cornered, and disposable. Director Na Hong-jin builds a world where human beings are traded, used, and erased by criminal systems bigger than they can understand. The protagonist is not a mastermind. He is a desperate man thrown into a machine that keeps grinding. That gives the thriller a savage realism. Every escape feels temporary. Every answer creates another threat. The film's scale grows from personal desperation into a brutal map of organized crime and social abandonment. Hollywood might turn this premise into a clean assassin story. The Yellow Sea turns it into panic, mud, blood, and breathless survival. It is not just about a man running from criminals. It is about a man realizing the entire world around him has become criminal. Number 3. Mother, 2009. A mother's love can look pure from far away. But this film dares to ask what happens when love becomes an investigation with no moral breaks. Mother follows a devoted woman whose vulnerable son is accused of murdering a young girl. Convinced he cannot be guilty, she begins digging through witnesses, rumors, secrets, and police failures, determined to prove what the system refuses to see. On the surface, it is a murder mystery. Underneath, it is one of the most unsettling crime thrillers ever made about parental obsession. Bong Joon-ho builds the story with quiet precision, letting small details become dangerous. A look, a memory, a missing clue, a careless assumption. Everything matters. The police are flawed, the town is full of buried ugliness, and the truth keeps slipping away just when it seems close. What makes the film so powerful is Kim Hae-ja's performance. She turns maternal devotion into something tender, frightening, and impossible to judge cleanly. The audience understands her pain, even when the path she takes grows darker. That tension is the film's genius. It does not simply ask who committed the crime. It asks how far someone can go while still calling it love. Mother puts Hollywood to shame because it turns a murder case into a psychological trap, then leaves the viewer questioning the one emotion they thought they could trust. Number 2. The Chaser, 2008. The most terrifying thing about The Chaser is not that a killer is hiding, it is that the system keeps wasting time after finding him. The film follows a former detective turned pimp who notices that several women connected to him have disappeared. His search leads to a suspected serial killer, but instead of becoming a simple cat-and-mouse thriller, the movie turns into a furious indictment of incompetence, procedure, ego, and delay. The tension is almost unbearable because the audience understands the stakes, while the institutions move too slowly to meet them. That is where the film becomes unforgettable. It is not just about catching a murderer. It is about the horrific gap between knowing danger exists and being able to stop it in time. Na Hong-jin directs with raw speed and panic, making Seoul feel like a maze of alleys, rooms, rain, and bad decisions. Kim Yoon-suk brings rough desperation to the lead, a morally compromised man who becomes more human as the night gets worse. Ha Young-woo's killer is chilling because he feels ordinary, blank, and horribly believable. The Chaser strips away glamour from serial killer cinema. No genius games, no stylish mythology, just brutality, failure, and a race against time that keeps slipping through everyone's hands. It is one of Korea's strongest crime thrillers, because it understands that fear is not only in the crime, sometimes it is in the delay. Number 1. Memories of Murder, 2003. Before the killer became a legend, he was a shadow moving through rain, fields, and police mistakes. Memories of Murder is not only the greatest South Korean crime thriller on this list, it is one of the most haunting investigations ever put on screen. Based on the country's first major serial murder case, the film follows rural detectives trying to solve a series of killings with limited tools, weak forensic methods, public pressure, and growing desperation. What makes it extraordinary is how Bong Joon-ho refuses to turn the case into a neat puzzle. The detectives are not brilliant heroes. They are frustrated, flawed, sometimes cruel, sometimes funny, and often painfully out of their depth. That human messiness makes the film feel more real than most crime dramas. The tone shifts between dark humor, dread, anger, and helplessness, but the shadow of the unsolved crimes never leaves. Song Kang-ho gives a performance full of bluster and buried fear, while the investigation slowly strips away everyone's confidence. The fields become frightening. The rain becomes a warning. The absence of answers becomes its own monster. Hollywood often wants closure, a final speech, a solved case, a face for evil. Memories of Murder understands that the most disturbing crime stories are the ones where truth stands close enough to touch, then disappears into the dark. That is why it remains the masterpiece, and that is why South Korean crime thrillers hit differently. They do not just ask who committed the crime. They ask what the crime exposes about justice, power, family, guilt, and survival. Some of these films disturb you. Some exhaust you, and some never leave your mind. So tell us, which Korean crime thriller deserves the #1 spot?